Welcome to another exciting episode of the Belonging Podcast by Elevate Villages. I'm your host, Melissa Kaye, and today we are joined by Jermaine Ee. It is hard to give an intro for this gentleman because he has done so much and there are so many facets of his life I'm interested in. So come along with me and let's just jump right in. Jermaine, welcome to the Belonging Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm so excited that you're here. And let's start in the beginning. I know that you were born in Los Angeles, but spent a lot of your time in Malaysia. Tell us about your early life growing up and being from two different places.
Wow. That's a very, very heavy topic. I would say I went to 14 different schools, including university.
Wait, 14, 1-4?
Yeah, 1-4. So we're counting
14.
kindergarten here. So we're talking a span of about 18 years or so. So everything from kindergarten till university. And that means that I moved around a lot. I had to make new friends over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is better analyzed looking back. Right? In the moment, it was difficult to be the new kid all the time. In the moment, it was difficult to feel like an outsider all the time. But looking back now, I think I got this blessing of being both in this communal culture of the Asian culture, as well as the American culture, which is we celebrate individualism. We encourage people to be brave and take leaps of faith. You know, on the contrast, the Asian culture is let's fit right in. Let's not do anything too crazy. Right, we want the approval of our family. So I think living in between those two tensions have really made me who I am.
That's so interesting because I also moved around a lot, was in a lot of different schools, not 14 though. I think you have me beat on that. And all my moving still was within the American culture. So I think that would be such another layer of complexity when you're from two different cultures. So you came back to the U.S. in high school, is that right? After a long time abroad?
Yeah, I came back to the U.S. after spending 9.5 years living in Malaysia. And I landed my junior year in October.
So even coming in late to the school year. So not
Late
only
to the
late
school
into high
year.
school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that would be my third high school. So we're coming into a third high school in October where all the friend groups have been made, all the classes, the path, the extra activities have been established. And that was truly, I think, one of the most difficult times of my life.
I'm sure. Now, there seems to be a really fun twist of, I'm going to call it fate, that you started taking piano when you were very young, correct?
Yeah, I think I was 4 or 5 years old.
Okay. And then you didn't like it and you wanted out. Is that right?
Yeah. So all 4 of us, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and none of us like piano. But we love our mom, and she always wanted to have kids she wanted to play piano herself, but she always wanted to make sure that her kids can express themselves in music. And so all 4 of us did.
And so now you've moved around, you're in high school, came in late, so awkward, so just a difficult time for any teenager, let alone coming in when you did. And so music had a way of kind of coming and helping you find belonging. Is that right?
Yeah, it was really a few factors there. You know, the first one was that I didn't have any friends, and there weren't that many classes that was easy for me to just jump right in. I wasn't going to be a football player. I was probably 5'4" at the time. and I didn't know anything about football. So,
okay, not an option.
Because we didn't have American football in Asia where I grew up.
Sure.
So my counselor thought, you know what, you can play the piano. You can probably learn another instrument. So I joined the marching band. And because I needed credits to graduate high school, I also joined the jazz band and later on the orchestra. So I did all of it.
Wow. Okay. Nice.
Yeah. And that was the first time that there's the little corner on campus that I got to go and feel a little bit of a safe space. You know, and I got to hang out with people. I actually picked up the French horn, which I never played before. And I was never really that good at it, to be honest, but I can read music pretty well. And so picking up a new instrument wasn't difficult.
Right.
But if you told my mom or you told me that at 4 or 5 years old, learning piano would become the key to assimilating into the American high school, right? I don't think any of us
Yeah.
would have seen that coming.
Yeah, I think that's just how life works out. This is the Belonging Podcast, so we talk so much about when we don't belong, and I think all those instances are very obvious. Anybody could feel everything you had to go through as you were growing up and in adolescence. But then where is it that we find belonging? And we find it all around us. We just really have to look for it. And so I love that something that your mom really just gifted you with, and even if you didn't like it, like she saw the vision for you, and that ended up being the thing that created a little bit of belonging for you in those rough high school years.
Arguably, it's still creating a little safe space for me, because I listen to
Okay.
music to reconcile with my feelings. I
Mm.
listen to music to take me back to places and memories of times of my life. I think as I'm 34 now, as I'm, thinking ahead of becoming a father someday soon, hopefully.
Oh.
Yeah, I think a lot about how there's not a whole lot we can control in
Mm.
how in the outputs of our children, right? It's like all we can do is really try to do our best to give all the inputs that we think is best for them. And I've been talking to a lot of my friends with kids, and some of them very successful in their career. And of course, they're trying to optimize, they're trying to do as much as they can to give their kids a head start.
Mhm.
But I always ask them, you have the first child, how did it turn out? Is it as you expected? Did you nurture the environment for your kid to be a 6'5" basketball player, maybe? or is one of
Right.
them driving go-karts and becoming a Formula One driver someday? And as it turns out, none of them could have predicted how their kids would have turned out.
Hmm. Interesting. So no matter all the best intentions, yeah, life has a way of keeping us in a certain path that we don't even know exists. I wanted to go back a little bit to music because you've had such an experience with it and it still plays such a role in your life. What do you think it is about music and possibly even art, but let's say music for now, that makes people feel belonging? I've not had this conversation with anybody, and it's very curious to me, but I sense that there's a depth of wisdom here. And so I'd love to know if you've thought about it, if this resonates with you at all.
Certainly. I mean, there's a science aspect to it too. You had a brain training startup in New York right before COVID. And one of the things that we tried to do is we understood that kids between the ages of 4 to 6, if you're able to give them a tactile and an audio and a visual experience, it develops their frontal
Wow.
cortex a little bit more. And the frontal cortex is where executive functions come into play. And without knowing all of this, I think my mom gave me this ability to sit in discipline, right? To learn something that I really didn't want to learn. It was so difficult.
Yeah.
But to push through this discipline and to give myself the confidence that if you keep up with something for long enough of a time, you can look back and see progress. And I think that's a gift that a lot of kids these days are lacking because
Hmm.
we see kids giving up things too quickly.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as things gets difficult, we say, it's okay if you don't want to do it. And I think that's a very difficult skill to instill these days. So on the emotional side of it, I think on the belonging side, understanding music has, they say music is a universal language.
Hmm.
And I think what it means to me is just that I can walk into any situation and feel deeply in conversations with people about their culture, right? About things like, what is something that we share, music that we listened to as kids, and how we can share this really unique piece and understand the depth of it. I remember going to Poland for the first time, and I walked by Chopin's music school. It's
Mm.
this famous composer from Poland, and I didn't know much about it except for that I knew some of the pieces, and I just walked into the school and had a great conversation with them. So I think it's
Wow.
this gift that it's just, it's this gift that keeps on giving.
I agree. Music is just so multicultural, multidimensional. Let's go back to your mom, because it sounds like she's had such a lovely presence in your life, and I know that you did lose her. Tell us, how did your mother affect your life, and what do you want us to know about your mother and that journey?
My mom grew up in a fairly simple family. She was born in the 60s in Malaysia, so this is 20 years after the Second World War. She's the daughter, the 10th of 12 kids. So huge, huge family. And somewhere when she was 19, 18 years old, she decided she wanted to leave the country, leave Malaysia. And she went to Taiwan to study computer science. And in the late 70s, she landed in Oklahoma. Of all places, she decided Oklahoma was the most affordable place that her
Okay.
Malaysian parents' savings can afford to send her to. I went back to Oklahoma with her last year, and we walked around and looked at these places that she used to live in, or at least we tried to find the places she used to live in. This was 40 years ago now. And at some point in that trip, I asked her, walk me through your mindset 40 years ago when you decided to leave the comfort of your home, being the baby sister of the family, right? She really had nothing to worry about. She
Yeah.
had a pretty good life.
Okay.
And she just said, I always knew that there was more to my life. I always knew that there's an adventure out there, that if I wanted to achieve more, I needed to take a chance. And why wouldn't I take a chance when I was young? So she did, and she moved across the world to this place where she didn't know anybody. And she met my father, who was also studying in Oklahoma at the time.
Wow.
They had to be in Oklahoma to meet because they both didn't have so much money.
Huh.
But I think what was
Fascinating.
interesting was, back to the topic of belonging. I think a big part of them being together was I think in the late 70s in Oklahoma, there just weren't so many immigrants. There weren't so many Asian
Sure.
immigrants specifically.
Sure.
and they, of course, they connected and they built a life around each other, eventually got married and had 4 kids. But the way I got my name, Jermaine, was such an indication of how they were thinking about belonging. Because when I was born, they thought that they wanted their first American born child to have the most American name possible so that he or I can belong in this country that carried so much dreams for them.
Wow. Okay.
And so in the late 70s, the most American name they can come up with was Jermaine, named after Jermaine Jackson of the Jackson 5.
Nice.
And it's such a beautiful story to me because, first of all, they didn't know that Jermaine was a primarily Black name, right?
Right.
They had no idea how being a tiny Asian guy named Jermaine would affect the way my life is. Getting into Ubers in Atlanta, ordering Starbucks in DC, where people question if I was taking somebody else's
Wow.
drink. Um,
Wow.
and they asked if I wanted to change my name, and I say no. Why would I change something so pure about the American story
Mm.
that lives in our family?
That's so beautiful. They wanted you to belong, and that was one of the ways they could think of doing it. Oh, that's precious. Wow. And so later on, did your mom ever go, huh, Is that why they asked you if you wanted to change it? They were like, wow, that might not have been the choice we thought we were making.
They just asked if, I thought that my name was hindering my ability to, let's say, get a job with job applications and things like that. And I say, no, I can't imagine my life being anybody but Jermaine at this point.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you have some stories though. Having that name, like just those very superficial connections with people could be really like, huh? Well, good on your mom and dad for naming you something bold, and for you for like really like growing into and just inhabiting that name. In the later years of your mom's life, you actually like took the time to let her walk you through some of her history there coming over here as an immigrant. And what are some other lessons that you learned from her in those last years of her life?
I'll take it back a little bit. So when I was a teenager, I was a pretty rebellious student. That's why I moved schools so many times. I just couldn't sit still, and I couldn't understand why does the size of Saturn matter to me, right? Like,
Right.
why are
Okay.
we memorizing these things that are so trivial? And to
Okay.
be judged, a lot of times to be judged, our self-worth is tied up to the grade that we get, right?
Mm.
And all along, I've always I've always known that my mom believed in me, my dad too, that
Hmm.
the grades that I got wasn't a reflection of who I am as a person to them. It wasn't a reflection of my worth to them.
Mm.
But as I look back now, I have so much more appreciation to how they were able to tune out the voices of friends and family, of neighbors, of the other parents, because the other parents were telling them that, what are you going to do about your son? He's so rebellious. He's getting into trouble all the time. He's arguing with the teacher about stupid things all the time.
Uh-oh.
And I give my parents a lot of credit now to be able to be strong, right? And not keep up with the Joneses, not compare their rebellious son to whatever standard society set as a good student.
Yeah.
But all along, I think because of their belief in me, I had an even higher standard for myself that I didn't want to disappoint them. And I think that drove me to work hard, but that also drove me to tie a lot of my self worth to how proud they were and to keep
Mm.
them proud.
Mm.
I didn't really understand this at the time, but I often say that one of the happiest times of my life was when I got into USC, Southern California. And it wasn't until 10 years after graduation that I had a conversation with my mom, and I told her, I asked her what was the happiest moment of her life. And we talked about it. She couldn't really tell me one. I think she said something about her kids, but then she asked me the same, and I easily answered her. I said it was the day I got into USC, because it was the first time in my life where the validation of my worth in society was validated by an elite university, right? The
Mm.
acceptance. I remember this conversation clearly because we were standing in the windmills outside of Amsterdam, just my mom and I. We were taking a day to ourselves, just mother and son walking around these windmills. It was a cold day. We had hot coffees in our hand and strolling through. And she told me that, she said, did you know when you got into USC, I was so happy, but I was so stressed because USC was the second most expensive university in the United States.
Oof.
And she knew the price tag, or she Googled it. At the time in 2010, 2011, it was 62,000 US dollars. Right? We're talking a year's
Oof.
salary. So what I didn't know was the happiest day of my life was also one of the most stressful days of my mom's life.
Mm.
And in this conversation, I realized being a parent, again, as I'm considering all the things about being a parent, is one of my mom's greatest fear was that she was the ceiling of my ambition.
Mm.
And months later, this conversation came up again, and I told her that getting into USC was more about the validation, was more about having the opportunity to take a shot.
Mm.
Whether or not, I mean, it's easy to say now because I did end up going to USC with a full scholarship, but I was trying to convince my mom that even if we couldn't afford it at the time, I would have figured something out. I would have taken a really big loan, probably a not very good loan, to go, and that I was just grateful for everything that she's done for me.
Mm.
And parts of me sometimes think back and wonder if I should have had this conversation earlier, if it was possible to have come up earlier. But that was one of the most revealing thing about my relationship with my mom.
Mm. Where do you find, and you may not have thought about this, but through the podcast, I've learned that a lot of people talk about, like, we have to learn to belong to ourselves. And I think especially in certain cultures, I think everybody to some degree or another, like, feels that, like, we want to impress our parents. We want to be accepted. We finally want to be good enough to live up to their expectations of us. Where do you find the line between, say, belonging in your family, belonging with your parents, and still, like, belonging to yourself? And how do you sort of navigate that space in between?
This is totally, I think, nature and nurture, right? I think, I forgot which psychologist said this. I think it was Arthur Brooks, talked a lot about how the baseline of our happiness is many times predetermined by the time we're born. If we're someone who's very anxious by nature, we got to work through a lot of the anxiousness even through our life and our family, but there's still a baseline of anxiousnness that was running through. And for me, I think for me it was always the switch was probably sometime after university where I realized I'm always going to be an outsider. And it's not because I'm always the one moving. It's actually because I'm the one striving. I'm always the one who's trying to do something more.
Growing.
And if I just stayed in my little bubble, I would maybe finally not be an outsider for the first time.
Oh,
right. But
so
because
true.
I'm constantly striving and I'm constantly trying to do more, and as you know, I'm building a legal app, and I'm not a lawyer. And so now I'm having conversations with attorneys 3-4 times a week, being the outsider of a field. And I've come to embrace this feeling of being an outsider as an identity. Right? Being an outsider is where I belong. And I just define it as the person who understands that as long as I'm playing the game that I want to play, that I'm playing the game of life by my rules, that it's worth it. Again, back to I just needed a chance to apply to USC. I didn't need to really go. I just wanted to know if I can make it, right? And
yeah.
And I think that switch comes with time, and it comes with maturity, it comes with experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mentor a lot of young kids, and I mean 12 to 17, high school.
Okay.
And I often try to create the situation for them where they get to feel powerful for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that came in community college when I took up a part-time job. And this part-time job, because I speak multiple language, had me going out to low-income high schools to teach them how to apply for financial aid, FAFSA. And it was a job. It was an hourly job, a routine. And I went to all these high schools in my neighborhood to teach the local parents how to apply for financial aid, not thinking much of it. And one day, a parent came up to me because I spoke Mandarin, and she said, "Thank you for teaching us how to find the money to send our child to university."
Mm.
And it was the first time in my life that I realized that my voice had some power.
Mm.
That something I say can create a ripple effect, a positive effect in somebody else's life. And I try to give this moment to everyone around me because I think that's the confidence we all need at some point. But we'll never know where it comes from for somebody. And so we just got to try and try more things.
Mm. I resonate a lot with what you were saying about kind of finally being okay with not belonging. Those of us who are constantly trying new things and never just happy staying in that one place. And so when we do that, we go through a lot of in-between seasons. So obviously, because of a lot of your history, you've obviously been in a lot of in-between stages. How do you navigate the in-between?
At this point of my life, I've spent most of my 20s trying to figure out how does the world work. I try to understand history, politics, finance. And after a decade of chasing ambition, I'm now chasing work that feels true to me. So the last in-between period I had was about the summer of 2023 to, let's say, the start of last year. So about a year and a
Okay.
half. And and this in-between period had me trying a lot of things to know thyself, to try to understand myself more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to and failed at a meditation camp. I tried to
Wait,
sit
you
still.
failed?
So it was a 10-day camp where you meditate from
Okay.
4 a.m. in the morning until 9 p.m. at night. And it's a silent retreat. So you're not talking to
Oh
anybody,
my.
you're not reading, you're not journaling. You're
Oh
simply
my.
meditating, right? And
Like, do you have to stay still or can you walk and meditate?
you have to stay still, but
Oh
you
no.
can sit, with your back slightly slouched a little just to get in comfort. But
Sure,
for the
I'm
most
feeling
part,
your
you have to
pain.
stay still and observe your breath. And I
Okay.
left on day 3 because I simply couldn't do it. And to be honest, I was very ashamed of myself for leaving
I'm
on
so
day
proud of you
3.
for making it 3 days. That's pretty amazing.
So my girlfriend who I went to this thing with, she finished all 10 days,
Oh
which
my.
is impressive in itself. So
Oh, she must be
yeah,
amazing.
I was really looking inward a lot, and I knew I was going to start a company because that's just who I am as a person. I was looking for a challenge, a problem in the world to solve.
Yeah.
And I wanted to not take investments because I didn't want to make short-term decisions based on financial outcomes. And I started understanding the way I wanted to work more, which is how many people I would like to manage, how many employees I'd like to have, and it's a very small amount, and the kinds of things I'd like to do every day. And so I'm coming off this in between season of my life, just being very self reflective of understanding all of it. And because of it, I had a lot of conversation with my parents about their lives and to learn more about mine, and as well to spend a lot of time with my grandmother to learn about my father's upbringing, to
Okay.
figure out where did all the preconceived notions of the world, where did that all come from. So I would say navigating in between is more introspective than anything.
Hmm. Jermaine, what would you say anchors you in life?
I'm really loving my identity as a brother and as a son.
Mm.
I feel the most proud of myself when I'm able to be present with my
Mm.
siblings. I feel the most fulfillment when I'm able to help them with whatever they're going through, as well as just the mundane of just hanging out, and doing not much together. I've been asked to introduce myself very often, and I always like to say that I'm a brother and son because that's the two things that I love the most, as well as being a boyfriend and soon a father. And I'm embracing all of this.
I love it. I imagine because you've embraced being a brother and embraced being a son, I imagine that will give you a lot of the skills and the grounding you need to also be an amazing father. So Yeah. Creating belonging for those children is beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about Ukraine. I understand that you did some work when the war in Ukraine started. Can you take me back and tell me what you did there?
Yeah, this was 2022. The Ukrainians call it the full-scale invasion because the war started in 2014, right?
Yeah.
It's an ongoing conflict that's been going on for a while now. When Ukraine war started, I had been very active with Rotary International. So I've done a lot of humanitarian work. I've
Okay.
mostly fundraised a lot. I've given a lot of speeches around the world to raise money for ending polio. And alongside that, mentored a lot of students to do things like create projects, leadership seminars, and things like that. So when the war started, I distinctly remember I was in Mexico City at the time, and I got a call asking if I knew how to transport medicine from Switzerland to Poland and into Ukraine, specifically for
Wow. Okay.
customs.
Hmm.
And there are some international trade rules with humanitarian aid and things like that. And so I just happen to have this knowledge because my first job ever was a logistics company, and also I started a logistics company with my mom.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I have this random knowledge sitting in the back, and so I started working on that. And one thing led to another. I helped a lot of projects in Ukraine optimize their processes a little bit. And through this journey, I read about a woman who, in her 9-day journey of leaving Ukraine, created a few spreadsheets and ended up housing 5,000 families outside of Ukraine. And in May of 2022, I was sitting on a stage at a conference talking about humanitarian aid for Ukraine. And this woman was sitting 2 seats next to me on stage. And that woman became my girlfriend.
That's a extra special blessing from when you're doing really great things for the world.
Actually, I think that may be the first time I shared that on a podcast, the story of how we met. And
It's a
it is
great
a
story.
it is a great blessing to have met doing something. I've been to Ukraine twice since. And what inspires me so much about Ukrainians, I remember meeting her mother for the first time. I asked her, do people wear nice jewelry and expensive clothes all the time? And she said, yes, Ukrainians love dressing up. Ukrainians used to save a lot of their best jewelry and outfits for special occasions. But since the full-scale invasion started, every day felt like a special occasion to them. And so whenever there's an excuse to just go out and have dinner, people dress up and try to enjoy as much as they can. The second thing that I found really inspiring for having visited Ukraine twice during the war is that they take democracy seriously. They believe that their voice means something. And as we're recording this, they're protesting. And sometimes it reminds me that it's so sad that I feel so jaded about the politics at home. I feel jaded that I can't do much to make a change. Yeah. And it's a little sad.
Sure. What can we do?
I think it really starts with each other, right? We ought to have better conversations with each other. We got to understand that algorithms are built to retain our attention, and by that it's just extremism, right? It's anger, it's things that trigger us. It wants us to share. And we're moving into a world where a lot of content and video are fake, right? And it's all generated. And so I think we got to keep each other accountable and be patient and have good conversations at home as much as we can. And I say that as someone who sometimes avoids certain topics at home because it's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And despite our differences, the more we talk to each other, the more we realize we're actually quite similar. We've just been down a rabbit hole of Instagram Reels or TikTok content that is algorithmically trying to get us angry.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a few guests on the podcast that kind of come to mind when you say that. One was talking about toxic belonging, that division is saying, oh, you belong here, but they don't. And so, and then the other one was, I had a lady from Australia and she said, the thing is, we try to be right. She says, but what happens when we're both right? And I've really taken that into conversations I've had since, of not having to be right, not having to prove my point, but just being more curious about your experiences and what would make you come to this point. But it can be hard sometimes. Where I'm in Texas is very, very red, like extremely. And sometimes there's not a lot of filters on people. And so learning how to navigate without matching their intensity, I think that's a skill that if we really want to create belonging, we have to learn to master this skill of letting both of us be right and really humanizing each other. We don't have to humanize what's online, what's on our screens, but each other. The more we're in a room with somebody, person to person, like I love Zoom and I love apps where we can actually see each other's faces from afar. But there's no way to duplicate sitting with a person in real time and spending time with people that we care about.
When I was working for the Treasurer of California, this was 2017-18, for the governor's campaign in California, I forced both of my little brothers they were in high school at the time, to go canvassing, to stand on the street with me. And I didn't need to stand on the street. I was doing the fundraising side. I was his finance deputy at the time. But I wanted my brothers to get a feel of what it's like to take a position, to stand for something, and to defend it. And to do it gracefully too, right? To understand that when you talk to somebody, you don't immediately make all your assumptions about them. Don't size them up immediately, but you try to ease your way into a conversation where perhaps you can find some common ground in what we all care about. And there's a lot of it if we can get past the surface level. And I think that's something that is also a missing skill these days, because it's so easy for us to stay in the comfort of our own cocoons, whether digitally or physically.
Yes.
And so I would encourage anyone who is interested to go and take a stand for something. And politics may be hard, but it can also be a nonprofit, right? To put yourself out there to talk to strangers about a cause that you care about and to defend it if somebody comes up in disagreement.
Absolutely. Yeah. And healthy ways to do that. Right.
And forgive yourself if the first two interaction was not as smooth, because it will happen.
You mean I can't be perfect my first time out the gate? Yeah, it takes a lot of practice.
I think what I realize in this is that every topic that I want to have a healthy debate, or a heated debate even, that the second or third iteration of it is usually better. Not to win, but to be able to see the other side as clearly. And actually, one advice I often give people is, before you go into an argument, try to just make their argument for them, right? Just put yourself in their shoe and fully play that part of what the other side of the argument, of your argument is. Because if you do that, you're better prepared and better reasoned to have a conversation. I think the tricky part these days is that the facts aren't always aligned.
The facts,
right? Yeah. So it gets a little bit difficult, and the nuance of it. But
you know what I love about that, Jermaine, is that you're saying make their argument for them. What you're really doing there is you're seeing them. You're not just coming with all your agenda, throwing it at them. Even though you might be doing it for a different reason, you're seeing them. And in that moment, that person's finally, maybe for the first time, going to feel heard. I just think that's really beautiful.
I use this on attorneys sometimes. I sometimes talk to them and they tell me what I cannot do in my app legal stuff. And I say, okay, how about this? Try to be me and take my point of view, and I'll take your point of view, right? And there's only one person from New Jersey who's done this with me, and he's pretty funny. We're just meeting for the first time, and I suggested this, and he took me up on it, and we actually ended up on a good place, right? We stayed in touch, and he's been helpful, and so
Great.
it's always it's always interesting to try to have a little bit more empathy in the other person's position, and what we end up realizing is it's not that far apart typically.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this app you're developing?
Yeah. So the conversation with my mom led to an insight. Her underlying anxiety around dying really is the fact that she's worried about running out of money before she dies. And so she didn't have clarity as to how much money she had, how much savings or 401k and things like that. So I built this little chatbot to talk to her. And in a few months of chatting with the chatbot about her dreams and her people that she loved and her aspirations, I realized all of that information can be organized into a simple will. And that's when I started working on this project of getting people to create their will from 0 to 1. And what I find interesting in a lot of life is things that are abstract are really difficult to grasp. We tend to put aside things that are abstract. For example, going to get our health checkup, right? It's like, it's not that urgent. We're probably fine. Let's just put it off a little longer. Or things like life insurance, they're really important like that. And estate planning is one of those things, right? If we even have, especially if we have kids, estate planning is so important. But beyond all of that, I think the benefit of having these difficult conversations about things that are abstract, like death and planning and things like that, is the clarity that comes on the other side of it. How could we possibly know what is enough if we don't know where we are today? Right? And that's what I wanted for my mom, which is I wanted her to visually see what she had today, to convince her that she had enough to live out her life to the fullest. I wanted her to know that taking a trip to Europe to check off a silly bucket list, in her words, isn't going to hurt her savings. And I think that clarity helped give her permission to do more.
Sure.
So yes, we are an estate planning app, but the goal here is clarity.
And having those conversations, I think it is definitely a conversation so many people shy away from. And we are all going to die. Like, that is not a maybe. You can't say, well, not me. It's not going to happen to me. It is. So I love that you're giving people an easier way to have those conversations and to go through and be prepared. It is truly a gift that you can leave your loved ones to have that taken care of and to have those conversations. So we need to wrap up here, but I do want to mention one more thing before we go. I've looked at a lot of your work, and first off, you are an amazing storyteller, which has made you a really fun guest on the podcast. But you tell story through video and through photography. And I know you've traveled extensively. And so your stories are so in depth, even just a picture. So I want to encourage our listeners and our viewers I'm going to put the link to Jermaine Ee's website down below and to his YouTube channel. Consume his content. It's beautiful, the way that you look at life, and you're so insightful about it. So my last question to you today, what does it mean to belong?
For me, belonging feels like when I close my eyes, and no matter where I am content with myself and all that's happening in my head. Well, I'm in a season of traveling. My partner and I have gone to 33 countries in the last 4 years. And because she had lost her home, in the sense of she couldn't live there safely, it has challenged what I feel about my home. My home is Los Angeles, a physical place anyways. I was born there, my network's there, my family's there. But more and more, I feel that when I travel and I meet more people, I feel like I just belong anywhere. And it's a very good feeling. And it's not a happy feeling, it's a contentment.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish people can feel that at some point of their lives. It's not a chase. I would say it's kind of like weather. It comes and goes.
Mm.
It's a little unpredictable. But the good thing is that I know, even at my bad days, that the weather will turn around, that the contentment will come back
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm exactly where I need to be in this moment.
What a beautiful way to wrap up belonging. Jermaine, thank you for this very compelling conversation. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the chance to share my story.
It's a beautiful story. Thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you being with us, and we encourage you this week, go out there and build belonging for those around you. Like Jermaine said, just close your eyes and in the moment, know that you belong right where you are and who you are, and this world needs you. So that's it for another episode of the Belonging Podcast. Let's go build belonging together.